I'm Doug Smith, a staff writer with the Los Angeles Times.
And I'm Jon Schleuss. I work in the graphics department, and today we are going on a trip down the Los Angeles River.
We begin our journey at Canoga Park High School, where the Los Angeles River technically begins with the confluence of Bell Creek and Arroyo Calabasas.
When most people think about the Los Angeles River, they think of the concrete. Where did that come from?
The Los Angeles River used to be a natural stream that would occasionally flood and actually changed course several times in its history. There was a massive flood in 1938 that flooded large portions of the city, causing tremendous damage. As a result of that, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers came up with a plan to encase the river in concrete. As a result, when we have several days of rain, the river will now become a raging torrent and rise up to the very top of those banks, but it doesn't flood the city.
So Doug and I looked at assessor records, and we found a lot of weird-shaped parcels that weren't all owned by the government.
That's right, and we don't really know why the government didn't buy all the parcels when the LA County Flood Control District bought up a lot of the river in the 30s and 40s. But we don't know why some parcels got left behind. The spokesperson for the Department of Public Works at the county said they looked into the records and really couldn't find any relevant records.
Fast forward a few miles, and the first large parcel that's privately owned in the Los Angeles River is what, Doug?
It's CBS Studios in Studio City. A spokesperson of the studio said that they were aware of owning the land, but it didn't really mean anything to them. They just let the Army Corps of Engineers take care of it. Up next is a large property owned by Lakeside, a private golf club. The manager of that said that he didn't really realize the river was part of the club. The property is separated by a fence, and he cleans his side of the fence, and the Army Corps cleans the other side, and that was fine with him. Some of these oddly shaped parcels are owned by Forest Lawn, which sold some of it in the 80s to the owner of the Smokehouse, a well-known restaurant in Burbank. The owner bought the property to expand his parking, but at one point he thought he might build a banquet hall over the river, only that plan never came to light. Then we come to a sliver of the river that's owned as part of these several large parcels of the Warner Brothers studios. And the spokesperson for Warner Brothers said they didn't really think of the land as being their own. They assumed it was owned by the Los Angeles County Flood Control District, even though it's not. This is where the river has a soft bottom, so there's been a lot of vegetation growth, and this is now one of the areas that is probably going to be the first to be revitalized. There are several owners in here, a lot of them associated with industrial properties along Riverside Drive. One, for example, is a concrete pumping supply company that sells those big machines that pump concrete into buildings. And this parcel we're coming up to is one of the more fun ones. This is owned by William Mead, who now lives in Bakersfield. His father bought it, he said, at a tax sale, and he inherited it from his father and kept it for several years, paying several $100s a year of taxes, but he liked it because it was something that he was like to talk about, owning a piece of the LA River. He finally got tired of it and decided to stop paying the taxes, thought that the parcel was now owned by somebody else, but when it went for tax sale, nobody bought it, and so he still owns it.
Because again, it's like one of those awkward shaped properties that you can't really do much to, correct?
It's 4 acres, it's almost entirely within the river. He, because of the easements held by the Flood Control District and the Army Corps of Engineers, he can't really do anything with it, except he can control access to it, which could be valuable in case the river becomes more and more used for recreation. And this is the famous 6th Street Bridge, which is now being demolished because the concrete in it was too old to repair. It's a famous bridge that's been in many movies, and I'm hoping that the replacement is as graceful as this one was. Now we're coming into Vernon, where again there are many industrial properties, and these are still owned by people whose companies owned them back in the early part of the 20th century. So here's a chunk of properties that are off Bandini Road in Vernon, and one of them has an interesting Los Angeles history. The owner's father, in the early part of the 20th century, used it as a mine to mine sand and gravel for the booming concrete business, which was building Los Angeles at the time. He had mules and horses that would go into the river, and they would pack the sand out and carry it to the cement factories. That came to an end during World War II, when the Army was looking for beasts of burden in the war effort and bought out all of his mules. After the war, the property became just another industrial property, and it's currently a truck service area. As we move south toward the outlet, we come across many odd-shaped parcels that look like they were once bridges or roads across the river, and now straddle it but don't seem to have any purpose. Down in this industrial area, as the river is heading toward its outlet in the Long Beach Harbor, there were many properties that were old industrial properties, and we didn't try to even find out who owned them or what their stories are, but we know from our experience with others that are probably some very unique and interesting Los Angeles stories embedded in these properties. Okay, so this multi-sided property is owned by the Compton Hunting and Fishing Club, which is still an active club. The members gather at a clubhouse nearby, and they go on hunting and fishing trips. At one time, they used to ride their quads in the river, but they've given that up recently.
What do you mean by quad?
Quads is trail machines or
four-wheelers?
Four-wheelers,
ATVs?
yes. ATVs, yes.
So does the Compton Club go fishing in the river?
They have a clubhouse that's next to the river, and they have lots of photographs of all of their expeditions over the years. But they hunt and fish outside of Los Angeles. I don't think they've ever fished in the river. This funny-looking parcel is owned by the Southern Pacific Transportation Company. We called them to find out why they own it, but they didn't return our calls. It looks a lot like some kind of a right-of-way or bridge that used to be a part of their system but no longer is. And now we're coming to the end of our 51-mile journey as we enter Long Beach Harbor, and the river takes the water out to sea. Should we mention that the water comes from Owens Valley? So this is water that would have evaporated in the Owens Valley, has new life in the Pacific Ocean. Is this being recorded?
Yeah, all of it is. Thanks so much for your time, Doug.
You're welcome.